The night started like any other, with the quiet hum of city lights and the occasional honk of an unsuspecting car, but that peace shattered the instant a bright flash illuminated the suburban street. The humans were oblivious at first, thinking it was a faulty transformer or some kind of government experiment, but when the ground trembled beneath their feet and a sleek, silver craft descended, blinking with strange, pulsating lights, panic ensued. People fled in every direction, cameras lifted instinctively, some filming the chaos for TikTok fame, while others simply hid under tables, muttering prayers or excuses to their pets. From the ship emerged a group of alien women, tall and impossibly graceful, moving with the elegance of beings accustomed to absolute authority. Their skin shimmered faintly in soft hues that shifted like liquid, and their eyes glowed with an intensity that made even the bravest humans step back. They radiated purpose, a clear urgency in every step, and as soon as they spoke, their voices resonated directly in the minds of everyone nearby, commanding attention without any hint of a request. "The fertile ones are gone," they intoned, their tone crisp and uncompromising. "We require human contribution tonight." 3 humans, completely unprepared for this level of interstellar drama, froze where they stood. Mark, a timid office worker with more experience filing spreadsheets than flirting, could only stare, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Jason, on the other hand, puffed out his chest, a misplaced confidence shining in his eyes, imagining himself as some intergalactic hero, ready to charm his way into extraterrestrial affection. Ethan, the nerdy type with an obsession for science and an encyclopedic knowledge of alien biology, though only from TV shows, immediately pulled out a notebook, scribbling frantically, muttering things about pheromones and genetic compatibility. Their minds spun, each interpreting the alien arrival in wildly different ways, none of them remotely aligned with the seriousness of the situation. The aliens' command was precise, yet the humans' understanding was entirely off. When instructed to prepare for immediate reproductive protocols, Mark assumed it involved some sort of ceremonial dance, starting to shuffle awkwardly in place, flailing arms in an unintentionally comedic imitation of grace. Jason decided to demonstrate his physical prowess, flexing his biceps and attempting a series of exaggerated push-ups, hoping to impress at least one of the aliens. Ethan, meanwhile, attempted to scan the air with his makeshift instruments, convinced that if he could map the pheromone waves, he could optimize the entire process. The aliens' expressions shifted from stern expectation to mild confusion and irritation, their authority being tested not by rebellion but by sheer incompetence. First contact escalated quickly into comedy. Mark accidentally brushed against one alien's arm and froze as a shock of unexpected warmth spread through him. The alien raised an eyebrow, not out of anger but subtle curiosity, as if intrigued by the human's reaction. Jason, still flexing and attempting what he thought were seductive dance moves, slipped on a puddle of condensation from the ship and collided into another alien, resulting in a very undignified tangle that ended in an accidental kiss. Both froze, eyes wide, not entirely sure whether this was protocol or a disaster. Ethan, having finally mapped the pheromone cloud, sneezed violently, causing a cascade of glowing mist to envelop everyone, resulting in coughing fits and involuntary touching that made the humans blush furiously. The aliens, exasperated but not unamused, attempted to regain control. They tried to explain the protocols more clearly, but each word seemed to trigger a new misunderstanding. Instructions about timing were interpreted by Jason as a cue to perform dramatic interpretive dance, while Mark tried to coordinate arm movements with alien gestures as though they were partners in some cosmic ballet. Ethan, ignoring everything, continued scribbling diagrams and equations, mumbling about human adaptability under chemical stress. The night quickly devolved into a series of chaotic, hilarious missteps. Despite the confusion, subtle sparks began to fly. A brush of fingers, a lingering look, a flustered smile. Moments that were supposed to be purely functional were instead loaded with awkward romantic tension. Mark, who had been cowering in a corner, found himself mesmerized by the way one alien's skin shimmered, and she, in turn, seemed intrigued by his complete lack of pretense. Jason, still convinced he was in control, caught a glance from a particularly stern alien that made his confidence falter for the first time, sending a thrill of embarrassment through him that he secretly enjoyed. Ethan, lost in calculations, looked up just in time to notice one alien laughing at his meticulous notes, the sound musical and enchanting, and found himself momentarily distracted from the science. The humans fumbled, yet in their mistakes, something remarkable began to emerge. Their unpredictability, their awkwardness, their inability to follow instructions, they were human. And these aliens, despite their efficiency and authority, seemed fascinated by it. Each misstep, each accidental touch, each clumsy attempt at communication highlighted qualities the aliens had not anticipated: creativity, adaptability, and the endearing charm of imperfection. Mark accidentally invented a new hand gesture that somehow pleased one alien. Jason's ridiculous push-ups elicited genuine laughter, and Ethan's chaotic pheromone mapping impressed another with its sheer persistence. By the end of the section, the night had only just begun, but the stage was set. Humans were bewildered, aliens were intrigued, and the air was thick with both tension and possibility. Laughter, confusion, and the first hints of romantic chemistry intertwined as all parties began to realize that the night ahead would require more than efficiency. It would require cooperation, understanding, and perhaps a surprising amount of human ingenuity. The reproductive protocols were far from being executed correctly, but the chaos had already started to transform into something else: the promise of romance, hilarity, and intergalactic adventure. In the glow of the alien ship, 3 completely unprepared human men faced a challenge unlike anything they had ever imagined, and for the first time, they understood that surviving this night would mean embracing every awkward, clumsy, and unexpectedly endearing aspect of themselves. The night had barely begun, yet chaos reigned with a vigor that no one could have anticipated. The aliens attempted to regain control, their slender forms moving gracefully, but each step they took seemed to trigger a new human disaster. Mark, still flustered from his accidental handholding, tried to follow the instructions again, convinced that this time he would get it right. He reached out to one alien, only to trip on a stray cable, sending them both sprawling into a glowing puddle of alien condensation that made everything slippery and shimmer like liquid glass. The alien emitted a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh, clearly unaccustomed to human sheer clumsiness. Jason, seizing what he believed to be his moment to shine, attempted a daring leap, flexing dramatically in the process. Unfortunately, he misjudged the distance and landed directly atop Ethan, who had been crouched to study a small device projecting pheromones. The collision resulted in a tangle of limbs, scattered papers, and a very awkward kiss that left all 3 humans blushing and flustered. Ethan, ever the scientist, barely looked up from his notebook as he tried to recalibrate the pheromone cloud. His scribbles had transformed into frantic diagrams and calculations, yet the glowing mist he accidentally created spread unevenly, enveloping Mark and Jason, making their skin tingle and hair stand on end. The aliens' expressions shifted from irritation to bewildered amusement as the humans squealed, laughed, and scrambled to escape the cloud, only to stumble into each other again. In one particularly comedic moment, Mark slipped backward into Jason, who in turn stumbled into an alien, creating a chain reaction of accidental embraces that seemed almost choreographed by fate itself. Amid the chaos, fleeting touches and accidental caresses sparked genuine attraction, laughter mingling with the shivers of unexpected contact. The aliens, trying to enforce the reproductive protocols, became increasingly exasperated. Their instructions, precise and methodical, clashed with human improvisation. One alien, demonstrating a technique meant to be subtle and controlled, found her gestures mirrored incorrectly by Jason, who interpreted them as signals for a flamboyant dance. The resulting spectacle involved leaps, spins, and what could only be described as interpretive gymnastics, all performed while attempting to maintain some semblance of adult decorum. Mark, seeing an opportunity to impress, attempted to join in, but his rhythm was non-existent, and his limbs flailed dangerously close to alien hair and appendages. The resulting entanglements caused more laughter than offense, yet the aliens were forced to step back and reassess. Accidental romance began to blossom amidst the mayhem. Mark, finally managing to steady himself, found himself pressed against an alien whose soft, shifting skin seemed to resonate with his own nervous energy. Their hands brushed, a spark of connection igniting as they both froze, eyes locking in mutual confusion and curiosity. Jason, recovering from his acrobatic disaster, noticed one alien attempting to regain composure, her expression caught between irritation and amusement. In a moment of reckless boldness, he reached out and gently held her hand, earning a surprised but intrigued glance. Ethan, still partially immersed in his calculations, suddenly felt a warm touch on his shoulder. He looked up to find another alien smiling at him, her eyes reflecting genuine interest despite the surrounding chaos. The humans, despite being completely untrained in any form of interspecies interaction, were beginning to form real, tangible connections. The miscommunications escalated further when the aliens decided to demonstrate their reproductive gadgets. Mark, thinking they were musical instruments, began tapping rhythmically, producing sparks and light displays that were entirely unintended. Jason, convinced they were performance props, started an elaborate series of spins and flips that nearly ended in disaster. Ethan, analyzing the devices, accidentally triggered one that released a cloud of luminescent pheromones, enveloping everyone nearby. The resulting haze caused temporary disorientation, clumsy collisions, and several accidental touches that left humans and aliens alike laughing and blushing. In that moment, even the aliens seemed to appreciate the unpredictability of humans. Their mistakes were chaotic, but they carried a certain charm and vitality that no algorithm could replicate. As the night progressed, the humans began to adapt in their own uniquely human way. They started improvising, using humor and creativity to navigate the protocols. Mark discovered that simple gestures, even when clumsy, could elicit positive reactions from the aliens. Jason learned that honesty and vulnerability, rather than showy displays, could charm the extraterrestrial visitors. Ethan realized that his analytical mind could still be useful when tempered with empathy and a willingness to embrace mistakes. The aliens, initially expecting efficiency and precision, found themselves increasingly entertained and intrigued by these unpolished but spirited humans. Moments of accidental intimacy became more frequent. Hands brushed while reaching for devices, shoulders bumped as humans attempted to coordinate movements, and every slip or stumble carried a potential spark of attraction. One particularly chaotic sequence involved Mark tripping over a cable, falling into Jason, who in turn collided with an alien, resulting in a heap of limbs, laughter, and several accidental kisses. The absurdity of it all seemed to dissolve tension, replacing it with a playful, flirtatious energy that none of the participants could resist. Even the most rigid aliens found themselves laughing, the strictness of their protocols melting under the weight of human unpredictability. Despite the endless mistakes and the comedy of errors, the humans' ingenuity began to shine. They created new methods on the fly. Mark used humor to distract an alien long enough to perform a protocol correctly. Jason employed daring acrobatics to reach a device out of reach, and Ethan combined logic with improvisation to stabilize the pheromone cloud. Each success, however small, was met with delighted reactions from the aliens, who had started to appreciate the humans not just for their reproductive potential, but for their creativity, courage, and charm. The night, though chaotic and filled with blunders, was slowly transforming into a shared experience of laughter, connection, and tentative romance. By the end of the second stretch of night, the humans were exhausted but exhilarated, their blunders having forged a new rhythm with the aliens. They had learned that in the unpredictable dance of interspecies interaction, efficiency mattered less than adaptability, humor, and the willingness to embrace awkward intimacy. Sparks of attraction had blossomed, laughter had become a language shared across species, and the promise of romance and adult adventure hung palpably in the air. The reproductive protocols were still imperfect, but for the first time, both humans and aliens recognized that the night could succeed if they allowed cooperation, patience, and an occasional burst of reckless creativity to guide them. The chaos of the night had escalated to a level that no one, human or alien, could have anticipated. Mark, Jason, and Ethan were beginning to find their rhythm, though it was a rhythm of stumbles, slips, and unintended intimacy rather than precision. Every move they made seemed to spark a chain reaction of laughter, blushes, and accidental touches that sent shivers through both the humans and the aliens. Mark, still trying to redeem himself from his earlier slip, approached one alien carefully, hoping to perform a gesture he had memorized from her demonstration. Instead, his foot caught on the glowing residue of one of Ethan's pheromone devices, sending him careening into her. They landed in a heap, and his hands found their way to places he had not intended, triggering a startled giggle that made his face flush crimson. Jason, determined to regain his composure and impress another alien, attempted a heroic display of human athleticism. He leaped over a low console, only to misjudge the distance and crash into a holographic projection that had been misfiring all night. The projection flickered and twisted, making it look as though Jason had collided with an alien double. The alien he had intended to charm reached out instinctively to stabilize him, resulting in a tangled embrace and an accidental kiss. He froze, heart pounding, realizing that despite his overconfidence, he had never actually experienced anything like this. The alien, for her part, blinked in surprise but did not pull away, and a flicker of amusement passed over her face, the first hint of softness in her otherwise stern demeanor. Ethan, meanwhile, had been quietly observing, notebook in hand, attempting to map the pheromone clouds and alien signals scientifically. His careful calculations had been repeatedly interrupted by the pandemonium, but he suddenly noticed a pattern in the chaos. By subtly adjusting the placement of his devices and guiding the movements of his companions, he could actually improve the results of the reproductive protocols. He looked up to see an alien watching him intently, her expression one of fascination. Without realizing it, he reached out to help steady her, their fingers brushing in a spark of electricity that made both of them pause. The accidental intimacy of the night was beginning to blossom into something more deliberate, and for the first time, the humans began to realize that attraction and affection could emerge from the absurdity rather than despite it. Mistaken identities and accidental entanglements became the norm. One alien, attempting to correct the humans' missteps, switched forms using holographic technology to appear in multiple places at once. Mark mistook one projection for another, and ended up kissing the wrong alien, eliciting an indignant laugh and a playful sweat. Jason, distracted by the commotion, wrapped his arms around the projected form only to discover it wasn't real, leaving him sprawled on the floor in a heap of flailing limbs. Ethan, absorbed in his calculations, inadvertently triggered another device that caused a temporary anti-gravity effect, sending Mark and Jason floating into the air, arms and legs flailing as the aliens struggled to stabilize them. The resulting chaos was both comedic and sensually charged, each accidental touch a new spark of chemistry. Despite the mayhem, small successes began to emerge. Mark, who had been the most timid of the trio, found that his genuine concern for the alien he had tangled with earned him warm smiles and subtle touches that sent thrills through him. Jason, learning to temper his overconfidence with attentiveness, discovered that listening and responding to the alien's reactions elicited far more favorable results than any flashy display of strength. Ethan's analytical approach, combined with a willingness to embrace human imperfection, impressed the aliens and created moments of unexpected connection. The humans' ability to adapt, to improvise, and to find humor in their mistakes began to turn the night from a disaster into a series of intimate, laughter-filled successes. One particularly memorable sequence involved a malfunctioning alien device that emitted a series of sparkling, sticky strands, tangling humans and aliens alike. Mark ended up inadvertently wrapped around the alien he had been pursuing. Jason crashed into the pair, and Ethan's devices sent a small electric pulse through the strands, causing everyone to jump and yelp in shock. The resulting chaos was a tangle of limbs, laughter, and accidental kisses, and yet, somehow, it worked. The alien stern authority melted into laughter as they realized that the humans' unpredictability was producing results far beyond what strict protocol could achieve. Romantic tension deepened with each accidental touch. A hand brushing against the shoulder, a lingering look, a shared laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Each moment added layers to the connections forming between human and alien. Mark found himself stealing glances at the alien whose laughter had warmed him, Jason experienced a flutter in his chest whenever his companion smiled despite the chaos, and Ethan felt an unfamiliar warmth at the thought of the alien observing his work with genuine interest. The accidental intimacy of the night had evolved into intentional moments of connection, with humans and aliens alike beginning to embrace the flirtation and affection that had emerged naturally from the chaos. By now, the humans had begun to innovate in unexpected ways. Mark discovered that his humor could defuse tense moments and create openings for connection. Jason realized that vulnerability and honesty were more effective than bravado, and Ethan combined his intellect with empathy, guiding the process with gentle hands and careful observation. The aliens, initially expecting efficiency and compliance, were instead captivated by the humans' creativity, adaptability, and willingness to embrace mistakes. The reproductive protocols were still far from precise, but the humans' ingenuity and charm were proving effective in ways no one could have predicted. As the night reached its peak, laughter, blushes, and sparks of romance intertwined seamlessly with the chaos. Every accidental entanglement became an opportunity for connection, every mistake a chance for intimacy. The humans' adaptability, humor, and boldness were not only meeting the aliens' reproductive needs but exceeding expectations in ways that strict efficiency never could. By the end of this stretch of night, both humans and aliens had learned that love, attraction, and reproduction were not merely technical processes. They were experiences enhanced by creativity, laughter, and genuine connection. In the midst of chaos, the night had transformed into a shared adventure, filled with sensuality, comedy, and the first hints of real affection that promised even greater moments to come. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow on the chaotic scene within the alien ship. Mark, Jason, and Ethan were exhausted, tangled, and sticky from a night of mishaps, accidental kisses, and pheromone clouds, yet there was a distinct sense of triumph in the air. The aliens, once stern and commanding, now lounged with an amused, almost indulgent grace, clearly entertained by the humans' unpredictable antics. It had been a night of disaster by every conventional measure, yet somehow, the reproductive protocols had begun to take effect, not through precision, but through laughter, creativity, and the messy charm of humanity. Mark stretched, wincing as he untangled himself from a glowing strand, and realized that despite every misstep, the alien he had been trying to impress was smiling at him with genuine warmth. Jason, sprawled on the floor beside him, groaned dramatically but allowed himself a victorious grin. His overconfidence had led to more than a few chaotic moments, but it had also produced some of the night's most memorable connections. He looked at the alien he had accidentally swept into his arms during one of his acrobatic disasters, noticing the way her eyes sparkled with amusement and interest. For the first time, he felt that his reckless approach had a purpose beyond entertainment. It had bridged the gap between species in a way no careful planning ever could. Ethan, adjusting his glasses and carefully brushing off stray notes from his notebook, felt a flush of satisfaction. His calculations, though often interrupted by chaos, had helped stabilize a few of the alien devices, and more importantly, had provided him with moments of real, tangible intimacy that he had never expected. The aliens began to take a more active role, moving among the humans with careful guidance rather than strict enforcement. Their gestures were gentle, their instructions less formal, and their interactions carried a flirtatious undertone that had been absent in the earlier chaos. Mark, Jason, and Ethan responded instinctively, blending their own improvisational skills with the aliens' guidance. Hands brushed deliberately rather than accidentally, eyes met with playful intent, and laughter punctuated every moment of physical closeness. The chaotic missteps of the night had transformed into a series of coordinated, if still slightly clumsy, steps that led to real connection, both romantic and reproductive. The adults found themselves caught in moments that combined comedy, sensuality, and genuine emotion. Mark tripped again, but this time, he fell into the arms of the alien he had been pursuing with careful attention, and they both laughed uncontrollably at the absurdity. Jason, trying to steady a particularly wobbly alien device, ended up in a tangled embrace that resulted in several teasing kisses, each met with giggles and flustered looks. Ethan, who had spent most of the night in analytical observation, finally allowed himself to be pulled close by the alien who had been fascinated by his scientific curiosity. Their fingers intertwined naturally, and for the first time, the human's logical mind surrendered to the unpredictable joy of intimate connection. Every accidental mishap of the previous hours now felt like a stepping stone toward this bizarre, joyful climax. The pheromone clouds, the slipping, the tangled limbs, all had prepared the way for genuine connection. Mark found that his humor and awkward charm were more effective than any deliberate attempt at seduction. Jason discovered that attentiveness and vulnerability created sparks far more potent than brute confidence, and Ethan realized that his intellect, when combined with empathy and care, could inspire trust and attraction across species. The aliens, once expecting sterile compliance, now looked at the humans with admiration, entertained by their creativity, and, more importantly, emotionally engaged in ways that strict efficiency could never produce. As the night gave way to early morning, the reproductive protocols finally reached a level of harmony. Humans and aliens moved together, guided by instinct, mutual attraction, and shared laughter. The glowing devices, previously a source of chaos, were now subtly aligned with the humans' improvisational methods, creating a rhythm that seemed almost orchestrated, though it was still delightfully unpredictable. Accidental touches became deliberate caresses, playful teasing transformed into gentle flirtation, and the air was thick with a sensual energy that combined with humor to create a uniquely human-alien experience. Every blush, every giggle, every spark of attraction contributed to a sense of shared victory, an interspecies success achieved not through control, but through creativity, adaptability, and boldness. The final moments of the night were a mixture of hilarity and romance. Mark accidentally triggered a device that released a shower of glittering, luminescent strands, wrapping him and the alien he had grown fond of in a sparkling cocoon. They laughed helplessly, stealing kisses between twirls and flailing limbs. Jason, attempting to help, ended up slipping into a heap with another alien, resulting in a tangle of arms and legs punctuated by soft, teasing kisses and laughter that echoed through the ship. Ethan, ever the observer, finally surrendered to the moment, allowing the alien beside him to pull him close, and together they floated slightly above the floor in a gentle anti-gravity effect, laughing and clinging to each other, as if the night had created its own perfect gravity. By dawn, the humans were exhausted, sticky, and thoroughly disheveled, but the aliens were clearly pleased. The reproductive demand had been met, not through cold efficiency, but through the warmth of laughter, the sparks of attraction, and the sheer unpredictability of human nature. Mark, Jason, and Ethan felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just for their success in completing the task, but for the connections they had forged and the laughter they had shared. The aliens, in turn, recognized that these humans were remarkable, creative, adaptable, and surprisingly resilient. In the midst of chaos and comedy, genuine affection and adult romance had flourished, and both species had learned something vital. Reproduction and connection were far richer when guided by improvisation, humor, and the willingness to embrace imperfection. As the first light of morning touched the edges of the alien ship, the humans and aliens shared a final series of laughs, kisses, and tender touches. Mark smiled at the alien whose laughter had saved him from his insecurities. Jason felt a flutter of happiness at the teasing glances of his companion, and Ethan held the alien who had challenged his intellect and touched his heart. The night had been messy, ridiculous, and chaotic, yet it had achieved something profound: the promise of future connections, the thrill of adult romance, and a vivid demonstration of humanity's unique ability to turn disaster into delight. Laughter, love, and the chaotic charm of humans had won the night, proving once and for all that even under the most absurd circumstances, humanity could shine.